people that died, like 4 in a row. Richard Simmons was another one. And there's so many, it's weird to say there's so many, but we're going to start the show in a few minutes talking about just some of the people we lost. And I just say that because it's a good thing that we can start the show laughing a little bit, because kind of on a downtrodden start, no less, but a really good movie that we're going to be talking about today. Well, 2/3 of us are going to be talking about today. We're going to review The Wild Robot, since Dubuque did not get Megalopolis, the new Francis Ford Coppola movie. And I regret to inform you, gentlemen, because the movie made so much at the box office this weekend. You know, it's amazing that we didn't get it again this weekend. We're not getting it again this weekend. It's a damn shame. I don't know if we will now, quite honestly. I don't think they're going to expand this thing after how poorly it did.
Let's be real here. It's gonna go straight to video on demand ASAP to try to recoup anything at this point.
Which, you know, fucking sucks, because like that movie, like, you know, there's right to be skeptical about it. Dom already saw it. Dom, would you not tell me anything? I already probably saw way too much on social media anyway.
Move on. Let's go. Wild Robot.
I know. I know about the club, just to let you know. I know about that. But my question to you, though, regardless of your opinion, it's a movie to see on the big screen, is it not?
It is a movie to see, period, and a movie to see on the big screen as well. I think it is worth your time as a work of art. Whether you think it's good or not is a whole different discussion that we will honestly engage in.
We will.
But I think it's worth your time. It is Francis Ford Coppola's swan song, probably. That guy's really old now. I don't know his age, but he's getting up there. He's been working on this for 10 years, supposedly. So longer it's
way longer, actually. Yeah.
It's a start and stop situation, but probably the last 10 years exclusively.
Yeah, there's been discussion on like, hey, so like some of the all-time greatest directors, what are some of their not so great hits? And when people were listing, it was a Twitter thread, right? It's like listing some of the things that's like Scorsese's put out a lot of movies. In fact, one of them just recently, I don't think we were very fond of ourselves. But in terms of Megalopolis, I will only tease very lightly with this, which is that I think of the three of us, I might be more forgiving. We will see. For what reason? That's a whole different ball game.
I'm excited to talk about it. It will not be today, but I'm excited to talk about it in the very near future. Fingers crossed. Either way.
They got him.
They got him. They got me. They got me. No, quite honestly, it's a short, I think, in my webcam video.
No,
I saw myself freeze, and I'm like, am I lagging? And no, it's really just the camera. But anyway, okay. I'm trying my best over here. But anyway, we have a first on Sleepless, quite honestly. We have a first over here, and I'm going to let Joe recite the ignominy. back and better than ever. It is Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. We come to you every Wednesday evening at 6:30 Central Time, coast to coast. Thanks for watching us live here on YouTube. A bit of breaking news just a couple hours ago. Some really sad breaking news, too. Liam Payne of One Direction died suddenly, weirdly, the age of 31. Apparently fell off a hotel balcony in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Just a couple hours ago. Apparently he was posting on Snapchat before then, just like regular, you know what I mean? So, sounds like this is a accident. Catherine told me too that I guess he tried to reach out to Harry Styles recently too for something.
Oh shit.
So it's odd. It's a very odd situation. I was actually on another Zoom call for work. And I got an email about like whenever breaking news happens, and it's usually a celebrity death. What the people at my radio station do, they send like a breaking news file that they play then every 20 minutes on the station. And it said breaking news cart sent Liam death. I thought, not clicking on it right away, I thought it was Liam Neeson.
Yeah. You would think it's the oldest Liam you could think of.
Right. And then when I saw Payne, I'm like, wait, is that 1D? And sure enough, it was.
Yeah.
So I never had much connection to One Direction. They've got like 2 or 3 songs I like, you know. Their music's now almost like 12 years old now, which is weird to think about, but
it is weird to think about. I'm kind of in the same boat. There's a few pop songs they made that I'm like, it's fun to listen to. Like, you ain't gonna catch me like, you know, listening to it on my own, but like if it ever comes on the radio or if I'm with people and they want to play it, I'm not gonna be like, oh Jesus. It's like, oh okay, yeah, I can listen to that.
And this is such a random bit of trivia. This is such a random nugget.
I've actually enjoyed the solo stuff from almost all of them rather than when they were together.
I was trying to figure out what song it is. I don't, because the problem, so basically, I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. This is a totally random nugget. I'm a big Springsteen fan. One of my favorite Springsteen songs is his song "You'll Be Coming Down," and that was like the second track on his Magic album or something like that.
Yeah.
But okay, I actually found it. They have a song of theirs, One Direction, that like borrows the riff of that song. It's called "Night Changes." It borrows the riff of that song. And the only reason I knew that was because I had at one point a big compendium book of Bruce Springsteen, like track by track. And I was reading, I'm like, all right, what did they say about this random song that even Springsteen diehards would be amiss to remember that I love? And one of the key facts or whatever, one of the notes was Night Changes by One Direction stole that riff.
Yeah.
Stole the chorus riff of that song, which is an interesting little nugget. So that was just one other thing I'll toss out. But rest in peace, Liam Payne. That sucks.
Yeah, for real.
Like, that really sucks. But we are a 2-man show, Gruesome Twosome. Miss Dom tonight's got some family visiting, though, that don't normally visit often, so we will hold down the fort. We only got one thing to talk about. There's really not a ton of movie news. We both kind of said that. There's really nothing pressing to talk about today. So you know what? Let's devote the whole show to one of the most uniquely interesting movies released this year that I wish more people were paying attention to. And that is a movie called Piece by Piece. It is a documentary it's like a biopic documentary on Pharrell Williams, on his life told by Pharrell, the popular producer from the 90s and 2000s, sometimes solo artist, often featured artist, if anything. So this movie, it's the first theatrically released movie to be done entirely with Legos, animated, with, Lego technology since the Lego Movie 2, the second part. Now, if you remember, I think we talked about did we talk about one of the Lego movies on the air or 2 of them?
No, I don't think you and I were ever doing the radio show when any of the Lego movies came out, because Lego Movie was 2014, Batman was 2015 or 2016 before I got to NCC, and I don't think I don't know when Ninjago came out. Maybe you were already done with North Central by that time.
Actually going back and looking, it was solo. I did talk Batman and Ninjago. They came out the same year, 2017.
Okay.
They came out the same year, so I did talk about them. You weren't my co-host at the time. You weren't my co-host at the time. That's what it was.
All right.
But yeah, I did, because I was like, I do remember talking about the Lego movies, and I remember when Ninjago came out, I was like, it's starting to get a little weary. The
Yeah.
formula's starting to get a little tired here.
I didn't even see Ninjago, but when I saw the second Lego movie, I was like, it's just not as good, especially when you don't have Chris Miller and Phil Lord working on these things.
Now, the Lego movie 10 years ago was just awesome. It took so long for a theatrically released a Lego movie. There were several direct-to-videos movies. There was that Adventures of Clutch Powers movie, which I think was the first, which wasn't a bad movie. I remember seeing that on Nickelodeon or something. Might have been Cartoon Network too. But that wasn't a bad movie at all. And then there was, some Bionicle movies and things like that. And then came the Lego movie in 2014, which really felt like an institution unto itself. It felt like it was a long time coming. It was thrilling to see that, like, on the big screen. I just remember that being such an event. And such a thrill to see. Then they made the Lego Batman movie a few years ago, which was pretty good. I like that one.
It's still one of my favorite Batman movies. It's damn good.
It's good. It's very good. Then the Ninjago movie came out, and I remember when they first advertised that, because I was like, "What the hell is a Ninjago?" And I looked it up. It's a line of Legos. It's a contemporary ninja-inspired line of Legos.
Yeah.
And that movie had a couple decent scenes. I remember there's the scene on the bus that's really funny, but I remember that movie. It was like, this probably could have went to streaming. Yeah. I'm like, this doesn't feel like an event into itself. The characters aren't very memorable. And then by the time the Lego Movie 2 came out, it was already 5 years later. We were 5 years and 2 movies later, 2 spinoffs rather later. And then at that point, it was kind of like, it's getting a little overdone. It's getting a little overdone now. These movies are kind of, my biggest criticism with the Lego movies, even the first one, is that it almost, if you look back, kind of ushered in this era of animation that really caters, and far be it from me for animation to cater to its target audience and not a 30-year-old movie critic. But that being said, it started to like really kind of take on the personalities of Gen Z. Where it was very hyperactive. A lot of the humor was meta-based. It was very Deadpool-esque. It was almost like a kid-friendly Deadpool in so many ways. And I think the best thing that could have happened to Lego movies as a theatrical engagement thing is they disappeared for a little bit. And they kind of just went quietly. I remember the Lego Movie 2 did not do very well. And they kind of went away quietly. And then all of a sudden, we get this really different movie that takes on a completely different personality from any of its direct-to-video or theatrical predecessors, piece by piece. Again, it's a biographical documentary on Pharrell Williams, the producer, and it tells his life story using Legos. And what better way, I think, to tell a story about Pharrell Williams than something that's completely unique like this.
Yeah.
Just like he is with his production and his musical work and his contributions to the industry as a whole. So that's kind of my prelude over to Piece by Piece. I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, man. If there's been one genre of film that I've always loved reviewing on Sleepless, it's documentaries. Mostly because, we always said this even when we reviewed them back on the radio. Documentaries are kind of like, they're kind of ignored a lot of times. It's not hated on by people like musicals. Like, if you recommend someone a documentary, they actually might watch it. They'll be like, oh, okay, I'll check that out. It's not like, oh, hey, you should check out this musical. They're like, oh, no, people singing for no reason? That's gross.
They've not been, nor will they ever be, real theatrical events. You get maybe one a year.
Yeah.
That I think, one a year, one every other year, that does really well in theaters.
Won't You Be My Neighbor, I feel like, was one that came out that, like, captured a lot of people. Like, I'm going to go see that documentary because of who it's about, what it's about, all that stuff. I really can't think of one anytime recent, honestly, that I think captured the world by storm that wasn't on a streaming platform, because we've talked about stuff like Class Action Park and the
BS High.
BS High, yeah, I was about to say the high school one. And recently on Paramount, they just had the Castle Bonita documentary. Check it out if you haven't. Highly recommend. So not only was it great to be like, oh, okay, we're actually getting a theatrical documentary again, but we're getting one that's probably one of the most creative documentaries I've seen in terms of its look. We don't get documentaries really doing this often. The last time I can think of a documentary doing this, and I should have pulled it up, um, is Tower, where there are segments
Yes.
of that movie where it's animated to recreate the events of a sniper in a deadly tower um, during like a very terrible shooting that happened. And I remember sitting there being like, "Wow, documentaries really should do this more often." Like as you know, as cool as it is to see photographs and then have a narration under it, that's kind of just been the style of documentaries for years, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you go above and beyond and actually bring a new visual style to a documentary, that's saying something, because it's just like it's not done often, and when it is, it should be commended. And Piece by Piece is a movie that should be commended for everything it does visually in this movie. There's really cool moments where it's like it's obvious that they have a camera sitting down filming Pharrell Williams, but then they're just animating over it with Lego. And they do it with several other people throughout the movie: Justin Timberlake, Gwen Stefani, other people they've interviewed. The parts that are animated in this movie, like fully animated, where it's like they didn't have footage to work with here and they had to use their creative imagination, are the scenes that take place in the past. And it's like during the early 90s, during Pharrell's childhood, during his early career. And it's honestly a really creative way to take a photograph of like Missy Elliott, Pusha T, and all these other infamous 90s, early 2000s artists, and actually bring them to life on screen when, like, it's like, hey, like, obviously we can't, show footage of, like, them hanging out because it didn't exist. But we can animate it. We can animate them hanging out after high school in a garage making music. We can animate them skateboarding late at night, hanging out with a bunch of people. And it looks so cool. The other thing that just perfectly captures this movie is Pharrell is just a very imaginative guy. The guy's been producing music for years, and he's just a very creative guy. And I think Lego just kind of, what's the best word here to use? I think Lego perfectly captures who Pharrell Williams is, because Lego is about all creativity. It's actually like the message of the first movie, where it's just like, everybody's special, and Pharrell Williams, like, has that whole mindset in him too, but it's all about being creativity. It's all about the color and everything. And Lego is that. Legos are these little bits of pieces that you can make anything you want out of, and it's bright and it's colorful and it's cool. And it's like, it just perfectly captures who Pharrell Williams is as a person, as well as his various, like, music career. There's so many times throughout this movie I was like, no way he actually produced that. I didn't know that. Like, one of them was No Doubt with their song Hella Good. Did not know he worked on that. I knew he produced All Right on To Pimp a Butterfly. I didn't know he was on the chorus of that with Kendrick Lamar. And the list just went on and on. Like, throughout this, I'm just like, damn, I never gave this dude that much credit. Like, I know some people write him off as, oh, the guy that wrote Happy, but it's like, no, I always knew there was more there. I just didn't know how much more. And I think this movie gives you a really good picture to see his whole career span.
Yeah, also a fun fact to reveal too, if you didn't know, the director of this movie, Morgan Neville, who is the one who sits down with Pharrell and interviews him in the movie, he directed Won't You Be My Neighbor too.
Oh, wow, okay.
He directed 20 Feet from Stardom, which was a really good movie about backup singers. Was a really good title, 20 Feet from Stardom. I always remembered that. He
That's
also
a damn
did that,
good title, yeah.
isn't it? I remember watching that after it got nominated for Oscars about 12 years ago. That was a really good documentary. And then the other one that he did, which I didn't see guiltily, was Roadrunner, the Anthony Bourdain movie a few years ago that came to theater. So Neville's been around the documentary block for quite some time. The other thing that really struck me about Piece by Piece, well, two big things, kind of external things, but worth bringing up, is that number one, like, we're now getting to like the point in time where the culture of the 1990s and the early 2000s is warranting assessment.
Yes.
It's old enough now, and enough time has passed where we're kind of looking back on the 90s and the 2000s and like critically examining them and, addressing how certain things were made, the culture standpoint of the time and whatnot. Like, so I think that's a fun thing. I think now, like, we grew up and it was always the 70s and the 80s and stuff, time periods that are very interesting, but we didn't live through them. But now as we get older, the era of our childhood is starting to get assessed in a way that I think is really interesting. There's that. And also too, you talked about documentaries understandably and taking it in that direction. I'm just going to say this. Is there any, and I know this, a biopic isn't the most accurate word because this isn't really scripted like a conventional biopic. It's Pharrell Williams, it's Snoop Dogg, it's Timbaland, it's Missy Elliott, it's Chad Hugo, Pharrell's longtime partner with the Neptunes and stuff. It's all, nobody's playing these people. They're all contributing, their own, image and their own voices and everything. But is there not a genre of movies that you think needs a bit more of a refresh now than biopics, especially biopics made about musical artists and things like that
Oh,
after
hell
what has
yeah.
been what has really frankly been, and I'm not going to mince words, a shitty year for this genre, from Bob Marley One Love to Back to Black, and I don't have the highest hopes for this Bob Dylan movie by proxy. Like, for a genre too that could use a reinvention, I think this is a really welcome treat.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, I've been echoing this since 2018, and I echoed it once again in 2019. In 2018, I was like, what the hell was the Queen movie called? Bohemian Rhapsody. I was like, this is the most generic thing you can make for one of the most legendary rock groups out there. Like, it is bland, it is generic, it is just by the numbers. And then a year later, we get Rocket Man, and it knocks it out of the park. And it's like, oh my god, yes, this is kind of more what we need. More stylized things to like kind of capture what the artist is about. And only years later have they just kind of taken the Bohemian Rhapsody route, because which one was more successful? The one that was a box office success and won like a ton of Academy Awards, or the one that got nominated for Academy Awards and did okay at the box office?
Same director, kind of, too, because don't forget
Bryan
Singer got fired from Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah. And so it was nice. Like, yes, it's unfortunate this wasn't a biopic. In some ways, it kind of is with the, quote unquote scripted parts of it, where like, it's not really scripted, but like the scene that we're seeing play out from Pharrell's narration and his like, point of view is being scripted out in Lego form. But it was refreshing to at least get something involving a musical artist this year, especially, that had a unique look, but also just like a very creative way of like telling its story.
Absolutely. I mean, this movie is a real treat to experience too. I mean, I guess the first question people are going to ask, if they haven't seen it, is like, why Legos? Why would Pharrell use Legos to tell this story? And he explains it in the movie. He talks about how he has a real intense connection with the toys, and that his idea is that we as humans, everything already exists as a product of the universe, is kind of what he says, and even if we create it, it's still something that the universe holds. So like the pre-existing blocks of Lego serve as like the foundation and the architecture of sort of his personal story. It also is really cool because it does things like, the nice thing about this movie is that since it's so tethered understandably to music and Pharrell's music, whether it's his solo work or whether it's his production, it can show music in a way that movies can't.
Yes.
There's the concept of synesthesia, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, synesthesia, I think it's called. The ability to process music visually. It's like a metaphysical concept that Pharrell has harbored since he was a kid. And it's communicated through like these like fluttering streams of pastel colored animation.
Yeah.
And then there's like these psychedelic touches in the movie too.
And seeing it being built by Lego just helps visualize that more. Like, you're literally, no pun intended here, but you're literally seeing the music get together piece by piece.
Very true. So it's little details like that really make this movie cool. And the thing that I love about Legos too, in the Lego movies, all these movies had this in some respect, is that because Legos, like, there's they have the opportunity in the movies to be a little absurdist or like a just go with it sort of thing.
Yeah.
Even in some Lego sets, like they could make like Lego fruit for like, supermarkets and things like that. But there's also like, there's still part of Legos where you have to use your imagination. And there's a great scene in this movie where Pharrell talks about working at McDonald's and getting fired from McDonald's.
Yeah.
And and he brings backpacks full of Lego McNuggets to like Chad Hugo, Missy Elliott, Timbaland, and everything. And the McNuggets are those little, like, I think it's the smallest piece in Legos. It's like that 1x1 Lego stud.
Yeah.
That little stud thing. I remember you used to have to use those to build flowers.
Yeah.
Like, I had a lot of Legos growing up, so I recognize that piece immediately. But it's little absurdist touches like that where it's like you just kind of go with it. And then there's another scene in the movie that is one of the funniest scenes. It's when Snoop Dogg's introduced, and it's got to be one of the smartest like jokes that I think works on both planes for adults and kids.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing is like Pharrell produced Snoop Dogg's song Drop It Like It's Hot, and I think he produced a few others.
Yeah.
It's his introduction when he first meets Snoop Dogg. And obviously what's Snoop Dogg known for? Smoking copious amounts of weed. They can't really show that in a kid's movie. So instead what they do is they have Chad Hugo and Pharrell spray aerosol that says PG spray. And it's like this foggy mist to like keep it PG, and it's like censoring Snoop Dogg as he talks.
Yeah.
But it's also giving like Chad Hugo and like Pharrell this sort of like, you could say, contact high of like, and they pass it off as like, when you're being around Snoop Dogg, you just get caught up in his aura.
To where he eventually even becomes a dog. And I was like, man, this whole sequence is just funny, man.
It's so rare to do a joke that well that's like funny for kids, but like irreverent for adults. It's still like charmingly and innocently irreverent, like you get it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really, that's one of the most masterful scenes in the movie. I think they nailed that.
And again, it's taking advantage of the medium that they have. It's so cool. As somebody who like loved playing with Legos growing up, whether it was building sets, watching the Bionicle cartoons or whatever, playing the video games, Lego Star Wars, all that stuff. It's so cool to just continue as I'm growing up, like this medium of Legos is continuing to expand. Like, I thought like, okay, like, now they're doing movies. It's like, dude, now Lego's doing documentaries, not about Legos. Like, no, it's just like a documentary done in Legos. It's like, this is insane. Like, it's cool to see that a brand like this is willing to license itself out and actually be like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, go for it. Be creative. Because that's what their whole brand is about. Being creative.
Yeah, and like you said, too, like I think Pharrell is one of those people that everybody knows. And everybody damn sure knew after Happy and Daft Punk's Get Lucky.
Yeah.
Everybody knew those two. Those are two of the biggest hits of their respective years. I think they were back to back. But I don't think I think the culture could use I don't want to speak for everybody here because you and I both didn't, I don't think, really grasp the extent of how much Pharrell did on the production side. We always knew he was a producer, but just the depth of his discography.
Yeah.
I'm not going to speak for everybody and say that like we forgot or didn't know, but I think we could I think the culture could use a reminder and how much he really contributed. Yeah. And the fact too that he didn't grow up in like a hotbed of music. He grew up in fucking Virginia Beach. Like, it just happened to be classmates with like Missy Elliott and Timbaland and Chad Hugo, who, like I said,
crazy to think too. It's crazy to think too. Yeah, like, while you think West Coast, East Coast when you hear 90s, but then in Virginia Beach you have like actually like these very like, it's like, wow, these are like big names on like the like R&B hip hop scene. Like, it's just like, wow, like look how many came out of this one era, and look how many of them worked with Pharrell to eventually branch off to work with both East Coast and West Coast rappers. Jay-Z, Kendrick, Snoop, everything, man. Dre.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you really think about it, too. And even Timbaland, who doesn't have a huge part in this movie, but Timbaland's another one, too.
Yeah.
That, like, his impact on hip-hop can't really be overstated either. And hell, like, when I remember like dabbling into like hip hop and pop when I was in middle school and like, listening to it really for the first time, like Timbaland, I remember, the one of Timbaland, weirdly enough, one of his biggest songs is that remix Apologize by One Republic.
Yeah.
That's one of his biggest songs. It was like, and I listened to that album. It's called Shock Value. I listened to that just a couple of years ago and front to back. And it was funny because that album is not really explicitly a rap album. It's a lot of new wave. It's a lot of alternative rock. And that was kind of like when Timbaland was branching out and even like remixing other people's songs. So I thought that was interesting. Like even too, just it's kind of a weird sidebar here, but I don't know when the hell else I'm going to talk about Timbaland on the show. So I figured I'd throw that little nugget in as well. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating just the depths of this thing. And I think one of the first reasonable questions you could have asked when you saw the trailer was who exactly was this movie made for? I really think that this movie, is truly kind of an all ages thing to its core. I think that this movie plays to adults as well as it plays to kids, which is really hard to do.
Yes, I would say maybe not too young of kids, because I could totally see like 5, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds kind of not like caring about what's happening on screen. But I could
Right.
see 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds. They're probably familiar with some of these people, and they're old enough to know what Happy is. They'll be like, "This is the guy that made Happy." Like, it's just like he made Despicable Me 2 song. Um,
Kids that are old enough to kind of have their own agency.
Yeah, there you go. That's the best way to put it. But yeah, I think anybody could really enjoy this for the fact that, like, it's just it encompasses a large period of time, a large like duration of time from '90s to today, and it's like wow, like again, just an impressive career overall.
Yeah, there's a lot in this movie too that I think is really, really special here as well. And I think that it's not it's inevitably it's a movie about a producer. It's a movie about an artist. So you're gonna get scenes that like are very music dominated in a way, and you get it lets the music breathe very effectively. I loved, and I'm guilty because I love the song too, but I really love the scene they let Get Lucky play.
Yeah,
And they show like a Lego version of Daft Punk playing that song and Pharrell singing it. I thought that was
man.
like beautiful.
I
Just
as
beautifully done.
as a big Daft Punk fan, I was really really hoping for I was really hoping for an interview with them ever since they've ended Daft Punk. I was like, man, please. But I was like, I'll take what I can get. Seeing them in Lego form was just as cool.
Yeah, I kind of because I saw him on the poster. I said they're on the poster of this thing, and like
Yeah.
I didn't expect them really to talk. They really don't.
Yeah.
Not and especially they really did. Even when they were together, they really didn't do interviews. They really didn't talk much. And now since they've disbanded a few years ago, like it was just a treat to see them in the form we got them to. It was also interesting too. And I really didn't know the depth of it, but I thought it was really compelling. The aside about him working with Gwen Stefani and Stefani being like admittedly nervous about like making her sound a little bit more like hip hop.
Yeah.
And I thought that sort of like when she made Hella Good, and I thought that sort of like honesty was really cool. And then when she's introduced to, what does she have to go tell the landscapers outside to be quiet or something? And they
Yeah.
actually do that in Lego form too.
What else? Um, the only criticism I think I have of this movie is because it focuses so much on Pharrell, they do leave a few things open with other people they've interviewed in this movie. And you're kind of like, wait, like, but did Pharrell ever contact them or ever like reconnect with them and like, continue to work with them? There's a moment where Pusha T's like, I put out one of the worst albums of my career. Everything was going real bad and we never hear from him again. And it's just like, what happened to him? Like, so like, wait, like honestly, like it's just like Pusha T is an artist I'm not really that familiar with. I know his big hits, but it's just like I don't know him outside of that. So I was kind of like, I kind of need to know like, did anything happen with him and Pharrell like after he produced that with him and like it turned out to be just generic and nobody was looking for it. There's people he produced music with along the way, and they're in the documentary. They interview him, but then towards the second half, after a quote, like, after they had, like, falling out and everything, even though everything's all good now, they're barely featured in the second half to talk about their relationship today. And it's just like, it would have been nice to have a little bit more added context to those scenes, because it's just like, I was kind of like sitting there watching, and I'm like, I feel like, you guys, I get it, the documentary is about Pharrell, but we spent a long time also encompassing everybody he had connections with and everybody he helped start or give something unique to. And it's like we only retouch on those same people like towards the end, and we only do about half of them, maybe even less than half.
I'll add too. I was kind of surprised. I thought Chad would have been a bigger part of this.
Yes, that's who I'm like referring to as in terms of like they had like a falling out, and it's just like, why isn't he being interviewed more? Why isn't he having like more say in this? I get it, Pharrell is the main focus, but still.
They don't really touch on too how the Neptunes or why the Neptunes disbanded.
Yeah.
Like that, like and Pharrell really took on his own life as a solo producer too. You know, so like in hindsight, even too, you think back to it and it's like, yeah, Chad was like this instrumental part of Pharrell's career, especially like the first half of his career. And you know, he's featured a lot in the movie, especially early when they're growing up and they're, you know, they move and he gets the agent or he turns the secretary into his agent and things like that. There's a like he's indispensable, but they don't talk to him as much.
Yeah.
They don't get his side of the story or like his commentary as much. So I thought that was that's an interesting little, I don't want to call it an omission, but it's definitely an absence, I think, that's felt.
It kind of felt, and this is a bad way of saying it, I don't want to criticize this movie too harshly because I really did enjoy this movie. It felt a little bit like favoritism, like they only wanted to hear Pharrell's side of the story and that was it. And it's just like, but honestly, what happened with the Neptunes? Like, the scene that they like show the breakup, it's so vague and mysterious. And there's like an undertone of like Pharrell is like wanting to break the thing up. He's wanting to move on. Like he wants to, and like, there's no scene to just showcase like a falling out. And I know like maybe a falling out just wouldn't sell dramatically over Lego form, but something would have been better than nothing.
Very true. There's another piece. I don't say it's a criticism. Well, actually, I'll tease this. We'll come back after break.
Okay.
But it's not a criticism. It's more of an observation. And I've seen other people levy it as a criticism to this movie. And I understand why, but I think the minimization of it helps the message of the movie. And it's a message that really, I think, is timeless, and kids, especially kids like 9, 10, 11, like you're saying, like the start of the target audience,
Yeah.
I think they could really benefit from hearing. We'll come back and we'll touch on that here. It's the Gruesome Twosome here on Sleepless with Steve. We miss our friend Dom, but we are talking movies anyway, talking piece by piece, the brand new Pharrell Williams biographical documentary animated with Legos. We'll be back here in about 90 seconds or so. Don't go anywhere. It's Sleepless with Steve. It's Wednesday night. We're live on YouTube. I will prove to you that I'm one of the biggest Weird Al nerds to ever walk the earth. What is the opening line in this movie? It's heard on the radio when Daniel Radcliffe as Al is or it's not Daniel Radcliffe at that point, but when Weird Al is young and listening to that radio under his covers, a Dr. Demento show, the opening line of the movie, and it comes from the radio, it's like, gabardine suits are 30% off. No Life Me over here did the Leonardo DiCaprio point at the TV screen and said to nobody except for my two long-suffering cats over here. That's a reference to his parody of King of Pain by the Police called King of Suede.
Nice.
In King of Suede, he plays a fabric salesman who owns a fabric store. And the opening line of that song, there's a sale on our gabardine suits today. They're all 30% off from yesterday. Your boy knew that. And I bet you there's less than 10 people that caught that. I bet you there's less than 10 people that caught that because King of Suede is one of my favorite Al songs.
There are some Weird Al super stands out there. And you are one of them, for sure. But I think there's more than you might be letting on. But
I want to know how many people picked up on gabardine suits being 30% off. But anyway, though, this is the long-awaited adaptation of the Funny or Die sketch that came out 12 years ago, directed by the same man who directed the movie, Eric Apple.
Directed the sketch?
Yeah, he directed the sketch too. Eric Apple directed the Funny or Die sketch in 2010. That had Aaron Paul. This one has a whacked out, weird, unhinged performance by Daniel Radcliffe, which is the crowning jewel of this movie. Daniel Radcliffe is great. And the funny joke about this, too, like there's a couple things with Daniel Radcliffe playing Al that's funny in itself. Number one, he looks like him to a degree. You can tell there's a lot of costuming to make him look like Weird Al, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, I don't know if you know this, Weird Al is a tall drink of water. That guy's like 6'3", 6'4".
He's tall as shit.
He's huge. And it's hard because you see him in videos, it doesn't do him justice. You look at him like standing next to fans, the guy is a giant. I saw him in concert and I was like maybe 6 rows back. He's huge. He's a towering figure. And Daniel Radcliffe is probably my height, like 5'10", 5'11". You know, so that's kind of one of the jokes of this movie too, is that like if you catch it, is like, man, he's definitely shorter than Al by a several inches. But this movie is very much not to be taken seriously. This is a total satire, a parody movie, probably one of the first parody movies we've gotten in a long, long time.
Yeah, man.
That is sort of an exaggerated, hyper exaggerated, not only telling of Weird Al's life, but also the rock and roll biopic genre in general, which we have quite a few examples to go off of over the last several years: Bohemian Rhapsody, Rocket Man, and Elvis. However you feel about those 3 movies, and I feel some type of way about each, those 3 movies are drastically different from each other in ways to make a biopic. Elvis almost is sort of an amalgam between the two, but to a dialed up degree. Where Weird, on the other hand, is just like, again, like the kissing cousin to pop star Never Stop, Never Stopping. That's been the movie, the point of comparison I made even when the trailer dropped. I said, this movie is going to be very much in that wheelhouse, and it absolutely is. What say you generally about Weird, the Al Yankovic story?
This, I actually did not know about the Funny or Die sketch, the original sketch way back when.
Oh, okay.
And I got a little nervous whenever I see Funny or Die pop up, just because their humor is, for me, hit or miss. Let me say this, in that it is either funny or it dies for me, in the true literal sense of that phrase, because I don't know, maybe there's something about the transitional period from 2000s to 2010s. Maybe it's maybe I just grew out of some of that humor. Some of it's timeless, don't get me wrong. Some of it, I feel like not so much, and I could go into why. I don't know. Maybe it was because I was more of an Adult Swim kind of guy. But not that this was, not adult humor, but regardless. I could probably write a dissertation on how I feel about that and still be wrong. But where this movie lands is that it plays it somewhat straight, and then it veers off into total insanity. There is a point where you don't even realize it, where it's like, oh, we're here now. We're doing this. I thought you were just going to play it subtle, but tongue-in-cheek, so not subtle. But then there's a point where it goes, like, full-on Police Squad. Like, Police Squad 33 and a third. Like the third one, and it's not. I'm not missing.
Are you thinking? Do you mean to say Naked Gun?
I'm sorry, you're correct. Naked Gun.
I also love. I didn't know if you were riffing on the show and adding the 33 and a third, but yeah, Naked Gun's if the movie you're thinking.
Yeah,
of.
Naked Gun 33 and a third. Fun fact: the reason why they said 33 and a third, they were gonna make a joke. The tagline wasn't gonna be the final insult. It was gonna be something about referencing a record, because it's 33 and a half, which is an RPM.
Oh, okay.
But then the executives were like, "Nah, no one's gonna get that," and then it ruined the joke. But anyway, and I also realized
just for the record.
Thank you. Yes, I so wish they kept it in.
We are back at Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. We are talking piece by piece, the Pharrell Williams documentary, animated entirely with Legos. I wanted to touch on this specifically. It's been levied as a criticism of this movie, and this movie's gotten overwhelmingly positive reviews. I'm not going to make this out to be like a warring faction, but this
movie was it was a festival darling too. A lot of people were talking about whatever festival it was first shown off at. So many people were praising it.
No, I could see why. I think it looks like it was Telluride. Looks like it was Telluride at the end of August. But it's been levied a little bit as a criticism. I can see the point, but I don't agree with it. And it's the criticism that the movie is largely conflict-free. And I or at least absent of a primary conflict. But let me say this. I think this is really a story of personal growth. This is really a story that shows the value of hard work and experimentation. And I think that one of the underlying themes of this movie, and I've long thought of it. I've probably said it on the show before. The most underrated trait in a human being is discipline. That's the most underrated trait. I think the second most underrated trait in a human being is probably curiosity. And this is a movie that really shows the value of curiosity. And Pharrell is a perfect subject for it. He's like guided by the winds of his own zeal. He fearlessly plays in the sandbox of music, his chosen art form. And I think this movie has a lot of teachable moments for children if adults take their children to it. I think it has a lot of teachable moments. And I also think that the absence of maybe a large external conflict of the whole thing, because there's not like an antagonist, there's not like an overarching villain or anything like that.
There's no evil producer.
No, nothing like that.
I mean, shit, you can argue that Pharrell kind of became an evil producer at one point.
A little bit, yeah, because it shows like kind of the duality of man in that sense. But I think the absence of a large conflict really lets us watch Pharrell sort of fine tune his craft, grind, keep his childhood friends close, and keep them along and really show their value through every like breakthrough he has as an artist. So that's kind of my response to some of the criticisms levied that this movie is sort of absence of conflict.
I gotta say, like, again, like I can see the criticism, I can understand that, but it is a personal growth story, like you were saying. And to me, the message that it gives, I agree with you. It's personal growth and everything. It's the same. It's essentially almost the same message as the first Lego movie, that like everybody is special in their own unique way, and like trying to be like all like like fitting in with the crowd or whatever is like not always like the thing to do. You should stand out, be who you are, be yourself, and that's who Pharrell was during his like whole time producing music. Is that he made beats that he could think of that were special to him, that he can only see. And later on in the movie, when he does try to follow the crowd, try to follow what's going on, the trends and everything, it's when he has this falling out a bit. And it's like, you could see why he wanted to almost do it in a Lego movie when he talks about it during the first interview in the movie. He's like, no, man, we should do it in a Lego movie, because he probably loves the first message of that Lego movie.
So I do think that this movie, if this movie were just sort of an animated wonder and like sort of an outlier, especially even for just a Lego brand, I think it would be worth seeing. I think it would be a good movie that's worth seeing. I think what puts it over the edge for me to be like a great movie is the fact that its messaging is very strong. And I love the way that it shows just the growth of Pharrell, the hard work that he puts into it, the sweat equity he had even before he started formally producing, when he's working at Riley's, music studio, when he gets that first gig and he can't really touch the microphones or can't really do anything there. I think in an era, especially for kids now that know it more than us, that it's all they know is instant gratification. I think this movie fundamentally shows it's a long, long journey to get where you want to go, almost regardless of what you want to do, like, and everything like that. Like, you have to work. And even if you do get on a fast track, and even if you are blessed in such a way to get on a fast track compared to your peers and whatever you do, like, there's real work involved or you're not going to make it. And that's true for any industry.
It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.
Very well said. But no, I think this movie's whimsical. I think this movie's fun. I think that its personalities carry this movie tremendously. And I think that you kind of get a glimpse inside the mind of Pharrell and how he sees the world, especially with that synesthesia concept of, processing music visually. I think that adds a lot to this movie and its dynamic visuals and such. So no, I'm really impressed with this overall. It's the kind of movie that, like, I try not to be too disappointed that it didn't do well at the box office, because it's actually right in line with its projections. It made $4.5 million this weekend, and it was projected at 3 to 5. So it's like right in line with where it was expected to be.
Yeah.
I don't think this was ever going to be a theater hit.
I'm happy that it got in the top 5. I know it's number 5, but I'm so happy it made it to the top 5. Oh,
and
shit.
And it admittedly, you're good. It admittedly benefited from what was a kind of a down weekend in general.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it was released kind of on a lower key weekend than it, because I think this thing could have got buried pretty easily. But I do think that this, and you said it too, I think there's real promise that this could usher in quietly this next generation of Lego movies that maybe take a documentary route or tell a story or something like that. That might be
anything more creative, honestly, because like Legos are limitless to me at this point after seeing this movie.
No, it's honestly true. So that's kind of my take on it. I really enjoyed this. I think Neville too. I think it's about time we start learning his name, Morgan Neville, because he very quietly has become one of the most prolific and interesting documentarians today because he takes on so many different topics and in this case too, like this is one of the most unique things that he's ever done. And
Yeah.
I think he does it really well and kind of just like really, I think if you talk to him would say he kind of it's Pharrell's story. He really kind of went along with it and just tried to do everything possible to tell that story the way that he saw fit. So overall, piece by piece for me, I think it's one of the biggest surprises of the back half of the year. I give it 3.5 out of 4 stars. I had a lot of fun with this movie, and it's one of those movies too. I'm not going to lie. Granted, it's not long; it's only 90 minutes, but this thing went by fast. This thing, even some short movies, I can feel the length, but this movie really just flew by for me.
Dude, I went to go see. I went to go see one of those. Steve, you would fucking be like, "Oh God," when you hear this. I went to go see an anime movie based on an anime show I watch. 1.5 runtime. I'm not kidding you. So much happened in that movie that I got overbearing that it felt like it was 2.5 hours. So seeing a movie like this was so good to see because it was like, wow, it felt like its length, and that felt good. Yeah, man, I gotta say, Morgan Neville, this is a name, like you were saying, this is a name to keep an eye out for when it comes to documentaries because I think this guy might be just finding his groove with filmmaking in terms of documentaries and just finding a great story to tell with them and a unique way of showing of telling them too. It's not the tearjerker that "Won't You Be My Neighbor" was, but dude, that's hard to beat. Like, I mean, like who that movie was about? That was about one of the most purest human beings ever, I think. So, but in terms of creativity, visual style, and of course the narrative of who Pharrell Williams is and learning about his life, it is very interesting, and that's what you could ask for at the end of the day with a documentary, being interesting and keeping your attention throughout its runtime. For me, it is also 3.5 out of 4 stars. It is a great documentary, and if you've been ever interested in, like, learning about Pharrell Williams and everything he's ever produced, written, sung, whatever, this gives you a great overlook over all that.
Very well said. Now, I thoroughly enjoyed this. Now, before we end things, I do have a bit of bad news. We are still waiting to get Saturday night out here.
Oh, no.
We are still waiting to get Saturday night. It'll be a cold Saturday night before we get it. So I was wondering if you wanted to bump up. I can let Dom know too. A little live planning on Sleepless with Steve. Would you want to bump up Will and Harper on Netflix?
I'm good with that. Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah. If we got to find something else, if obviously Saturday night's taking forever to get out by you guys as well by week 3, I have some ideas, but we'll talk about it in the green room.
Yeah, we got the okie doke pulled on us too. They were supposed to have Saturday night. It was on the schedule for last week. I keep saying they pulled the okie doke on us. They gave us The Apprentice instead.
So that was the movie I was gonna say by week 3. If you don't have Saturday night out there, let's do that then.
Yeah, that's fine with me. That we're seeing it this weekend. That's fine by me.
Okay.
That's our show tonight, though. Great review. Gruesome Twosome today. Back in action next week with the review of Will and Harper on Netflix. We'll have our buddy Dominic back, hopefully, by then. Really great discussion. Really just got to dive into the nitty-gritty on what I think is one of the more unique movies of the year. Certainly one of the most unique documentaries of the year. Had a lot of fun chatting with you as always, Joe. Thank you so much for doing what you do behind the scenes, too, to make sure this show runs as smoothly as it does for an hour every Wednesday night. We come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening, 6:30 Central Time. We'll see you same time, same place next week. For Joe Viso, the unseen but loved Dominic Guanzon, and yours truly, this has been Sleepless with Steve.